ABC. That's why we stand here so proud. It's not for sale, it was built to last. That's why we need to say it loud. Where would we be without our ABC and everything that it means? It's photos, drama, docos and comedy and great investigative teams. But there are some who'd like to see it gone to suit their commercial mind. But it still stands for truth and reason, and that's why we live it. Where would we be without our ABC? We'd make it stronger if we could. So just keep your grubby mitts on, 'cause if it goes, it's gone for good. So just keep your grubby mitts off, 'cause if it goes, it's gone for good.
Good evening, and isn't that a wonderful way to start? Where would we be without our ABC? Hello, my name's Janine Kitson, and I'm an independent candidate for the seat of Bradfield that is located in the northern suburbs of Sydney. Welcome to my Bradfield Can Do Better webinar, this time in conversation with Kerry O'Brien. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land where we meet and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I also acknowledge the ABC's ongoing commitment for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in sharing their languages, stories, and culture. Tonight, Kerry and I will be talking about the ABC and why it means so much to so many of us. The ABC keeps us informed, safe, entertained, and educated. It's a national treasure.
Janine's muted.
No sound.
Janine, you're muted.
Okay, I don't know where I finished, but let's get up now to the point where we're introducing Kerry O'Brien. He's an award-winning journalist who's given political reporting on ABC's 7:30 Report, Four Corners and Lateline. Welcome, Kerry.
Janine, how are you?
I'm very excited. So, Kerry, you've spoken in the past about the role that the ABC radio played in your parents' and grandparents' lives, and many Australians share that experience, including Walter Bass, who lived in this electorate and founded the Friends of the ABC. Walter came from Vienna, where he saw firsthand what happened when the media was threatened. Can you tell us a little bit about the role the ABC played in your life growing up, and how does that compare with its role today? Can you hear us, Kerry?
I think he might have dropped out, actually.
So,
He has. I'm sorry.
so we're just waiting for Kerry to get back online.
What a bummer. We had a trial run and it went fine.
So we're just waiting for Kerry he'll ring you up, I think, Wayne. That's what we've arranged. So that would
Yeah,
be
we could
good
do both,
worry.
actually. and we could just at least keep him going audio if he drops out. But best laid plans. The fact that we've got so many people shouldn't affect him. It shouldn't affect.
You might not realise he's offline. Somebody should call him.
Okay.
I think he will. He will.
It must be the communications minister.
There could be some interruption. There's a lot of people who are taking interest in what we're doing, and this could be the reason.
I will try ringing him.
You wouldn't be hinting that the member for Bradfield currently wouldn't be up to some mischief.
Oh, here's Wayne ringing me. You're ringing
You
me.
mean Paul
Wayne?
Fletcher, do you?
Yes.
He's entitled to the presumption of innocence.
Sorry, I did ring the wrong number.
The
too.
NBN had outages all weekend in my area. So thank you, member for Bradfield.
And I'd like to, from ABC Friends Victoria, Janine, I'd like to wish you all the best for this campaign.
Thank you very much. And of course, I'm only doing a driving force in me standing is because of the ABC and what this community has done in the last year and so, where we've really sort of mounted a really strong community campaign to our local member. Hello, welcome back, Kerry.
I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
I just want to throw in that I noticed that Nicolette Burl's presentation on Sunday for her launch was really great, but there was one thing missing, and that was our broadcasters. They weren't part of that discussion, and nor was education. So it was very disappointing.
I'm
Hello,
back,
Kerry's back.
and unmuted.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Kerry. This is wonderful. Welcome.
I'm sorry about that. That's a bit of a comment on the state of telecommunications in one of Australia's most visited regions. Anyway,
Yes.
look, you were Janine. You were asking about the importance of the ABC back in my parents' time, and it was the Second World War. There was enormous reliance by Australians on the ABC, which was ABC radio, which was in its infancy in those days. The rise of Hitler, the invasions through Europe, the whole of the Second World War, the advance of the Japanese. The ABC's first war correspondent, Chester Wilmot, was basically covering the war along the Kokoda Trail with the Australian troops and fell out of favour with the top military brass because he was reporting the truth, and they didn't particularly like the truth as he was reporting it. The ABC backed him as they should have, and he continued on following the troops right through the rest of that war. And that's a tradition that the ABC has always followed, reporting without fear or favour. And the ABC, for me, growing up, it was just a constant part of my life. When television began broadcasting in Queensland, where I lived as a child in 1959, it's just been a constant in my life ever since. And I think many Australians can say the same thing.
Thanks, Kerry. And my next question that I'm going to say is taking it a bit closer to 2019. And it was a time when I think many Australians were really visibly shocked when the Australian Federal Police raided the ABC Sydney's headquarters. And for me, it felt like it was time to draw a line in the sand. How has press freedom, what's the state of it? Has it got worse? And what needs to be done to protect the freedom of our press?
Well, I mean, you started by talking about that Second World War build-up and most authoritarian regimes of all time, where, of course, there was no free media at all. A strong media is such a fundamental part of a healthy democracy. And Australians, I think, at times have taken the precious gift of democracy that we have inherited for granted. I don't think our media at this stage is in a terribly strong position, and I don't think it's any accident that our democracy is going through tough times as well. Those raids on the ABC offices, that raid on the ABC offices, and also a separate raid on the home of a Herald Sun journalist on another case, which was a very heavy-handed approach by the federal police, which many journalists took as a signal that they were going to come down on us if we, again, reported without fear or favour. And in the case of the ABC stories that had incurred their wrath, these were really important stories about alleged war crimes by Australian soldiers in Afghanistan. So I don't think it'll happen lightly or easily again in the near future, but the truth is it can happen. I've been very lucky in a way to have enjoyed most of my journalism through what some people would call a golden age. It's certainly a golden age compared to what we're seeing today. So I am in a position to measure between the strong press freedoms that I enjoyed for most of my journalism to what my colleagues of today are now experiencing. And it's a deep worry. It is a deep worry. The mainstream traditional commercial media are struggling. There has never been, I think, a stronger need outside of wartime for the ABC to be able to report, to be well resourced and to be able to report independent of government and to be seen to be independent of government without any sense of intimidation. And I think that some of our journalists are intimidated.
Well, a little bit relating to that, what you've just said is about how we can guarantee an independent ABC, and particularly its board, and protecting it from political interference. And I know the ABC's chair, Ida Buttrose, has spoken about this in very strong terms. How can the process of appointing new board members be strengthened to guard against political appointments? And what can be done to prevent ministers from interfering in ABC board or editorial decisions?
Well, the problem is that there is actually a structure in place that where an arm's length committee outside of the political process and outside of the Parliament and outside of the Minister's office comes up with a list of recommendations, a short list of recommendations for board appointments. And unfortunately, the last several governments have tended to ignore those lists and gone rogue in a way. So I think the boards, I won't go so strongly as to say are tainted, but those boards do not present, at times have not presented in the independent way that we would want them to. And I think it's incredibly important that senior management of the ABC feels supported by the board. It has to have confidence in the board. And the staff of the ABC have to have confidence in both senior management and the board if they're going to feel safe in going about their daily task, which is, as far as journalists are concerned and as far as the news side of the ABC is concerned, is about calling the people who are in power, whether it's governments, whether it's corporations, whether it's any institution that wields power in our society, being able to put the light on them, to scrutinise their operations and call them to account if they're abusing their power. Now, you know, censorship is insidious. Self-censorship is the most, I think, is the most insidious form of censorship. And self-censorship sometimes comes about if the people who are supposed to be reporting faithfully feel that they might be discriminated against, that it might affect their career adversely if they do report without fear or favour. And so sometimes journalists are human. Sometimes a journalist might pull his or her punches for that reason. And self-censorship, as I say, is insidious because often it's unseen.
Well, thank you for that. Just going now to cuts, funding cuts. One of the things that really concerns many of us in Bradfield is the cuts to the ABC. And since 2014, $783 million has been cut, with 1,200 staff lost. What impact have these cuts had on the ABC, and how can we best protect the ABC from more cuts?
Well, I think that, I think that that's a really important point that you raised right at the end. How can Australians who care about the ABC make their voices heard? Look, I was working for Four Corners back in 1976 when the Fraser government cut ABC funding. I saw the impacts then. I saw experienced staff essentially shown the door with redundancies. I was at the ABC at 7:30 when the Howard government came in. The ABC budget was cut severely. And I saw the impact of that, and the impact over time was quite disturbing, quite worrying. And it might not have necessarily been visible to the audience on the outside looking in, but it was certainly visible to us working inside. And I know the kinds of corners that were cut as people struggled to try and maintain standards and continue to find adequate resources to cover the range of stories that it was our responsibility to cover. Again, when the Abbott government came in, then the Turnbull government, and then the Morrison government, cuts have been sustained against the ABC every time, and it has a corrosive effect over time. Labor governments haven't always been the friend of the ABC either, and been upset not infrequently at all when they've thought that when what the ABC has been reporting about their governments has hurt them in one way or another, and that's as it should be. I think the ABC can feel probably at its best when it's feeling the heat from both sides of politics. But the pattern is there with Conservative governments in my time at the ABC, since the advent of the Fraser government in '76. This pattern: government comes in, one of the first targets for cuts is the ABC. And I really don't understand this obsession with trying to, and quite openly, some of those senior politicians have talked about not destroying the ABC, but destroying the culture that they perceive to be running the ABC, which at times I've thought has entered the theatre of the absurd in some of the kind of flights of fancy that some politicians have applied to the ABC and how it runs. I've been immensely lucky to have been a part of a process where not only are you invited to try to pursue excellence in your craft, it is expected of you that you will pursue excellence and that you will stand and be counted alongside your colleagues in bringing the best quality and the most accurate journalism that you can to the range of stories that you cover. And that the ABC's record speaks for itself. When you look at, again, we started off talking about the Second World War. You look at the Iraq War, look at the war in Afghanistan. When Australian troops went into both those places, when both those countries were invaded, Australian correspondents, there were handfuls of Australian correspondents around there, and the ABC was always well represented in those front lines. And there was a big Australian stake in those wars, and those wars were being reported with Australian eyes, independent Australian eyes. And as the full disaster of the Iraq War in particular began to become evident, we went about our task day after day, trying to call the government to account on the decision it took to engage Australia in that disastrous Iraq War really on flimsy grounds, on grounds that turned out simply to be untrue. Those are important moments in the history of a country, and they are very important moments in the history of journalism. So when you are cut, and when your budgets are cut and then cut again, and then cut again, and then maybe you have a brief period where you can stabilise again, and you have found ways to cut corners and keep your stuff going. Then further cuts come. You hit again. At some point, something really fundamental is lost. That's the great risk. I don't think it's yet got to that point but I can see on air myself. I mean, I've got trained eyes in the stuff. I can see when the ABC is struggling, and it is. And there's a real wake-up call. Now, just to come to the second part of your question about what can people do, I think now, more than ever before, Australians who have been saying, who have spent half their lives saying from time to time, I love the ABC. The ABC is incredibly important to me. My ABC. It is time now for those people, I think, to actually stand up and use their voice. And it's interesting to me to watch at a time that Australians are uneasy about the state of their democracy, about the state of the major parties, about the sometimes flimsy quality of our leaders, and this sense that things are not going right. Big policy issues like climate change that I first started reporting when I went to America as a correspondent in 1983. And then when we started Lateline in 1990, I went back when I was writing a book 2 or 3 years ago and was looking back through some of those old programs I'd done. There was a program in 1992 or 93 on Lateline, a half-hour discussion on climate change, which I could have transposed to 2002 or 2003 or to 2013 or to 2018, and it could have been the same conversation. So there is this sense that government has lost its capacity to properly govern. It's losing people on issues that leave us anxious. You know, we even with the weaknesses that we see in our media today, we are still reasonably well informed. And we know the areas that are not working in policy terms. And we have this sense that the politicians are not actually grappling with policy. And so you're seeing the rise of independents. You're seeing this process where independents are coming to the fore. They are highlighting 4 or 5 crucial issues. And one of them this time around, I'm pleased to say, is the ABC. So there's a reason for that. People are starting to say about the ABC, I believe, enough is enough. And demands should be made on both sides of politics to absolutely lay out. And the other part of the trouble is, of course, promises don't have the same currency they once did. It seems to be easier for politicians seem to find it easier to promise the world and then walk away from it. But I think that when you say, what can we do? What can people do? Well, I think in an electorate like Bradfield, which is one of the safest Conservative electorates in the country, if not the safest, certainly one of, I think people can consider it. I'm very clear about this. I don't want to tell anybody how to vote. That's not my role. But I certainly want you to think about how you can make your vote count on issues that are fundamental to you. And if you yourself are a Conservative member of the Conservative Bradfield electorate of Bradfield, or any of these other Conservative electorates where independents are actually showing their mettle, I think that one possibility for people is to use a vote for an independent as a way of expressing your concern about an issue like the ABC. Use your voice that way, and if you want to then put your preference back to where it might always have been with the Conservatives, fine. But if there's a 10 or 15% swing where people have used their voice in that way, that is sending a very powerful message. In the same way, only more dramatically, when Zali Steggall sent a very powerful message to the last government by winning in another of Australia's more conservative seats. So we're not powerless. We're not powerless, Janine. I think that it really is. Democracy is incredibly precious. A free media is a very important part of that precious gift that we have of democracy. Our vote is one of the most precious things we have. We should make it count and not just always vote the same way. I think every time an election comes around, we should ask ourselves questions about what are the most important issues of this campaign, not just for me, but for my children and for my community.
Thanks, Kerry. What's building on from that, my concern is the possibility that the ABC could be privatised, because in 2018, the Federal Council of the Liberal Party voted to privatise the ABC, and that resolution is still on the books. So have you got a comment about that one as well?
Well, I think in fairness, I would say that both major, I mean, the Federal Council of the Liberal Party is, I suppose, as close as you can get to the equivalent of the Labor Party's National Conference. And both of those parties, both of those bodies, so the Federal Council of the Liberal Party is like the peak oversight body of the Liberal Party. Both parties, I must say, have elements on their platforms that are probably never going to see the light of day when the party finds government in the parliament, or forms a government in the parliament. Both major parties have always, at some point or other, got a policy that's come through the platform of their peak body, which they probably wish wasn't there because it's embarrassing. But it is worrying. It is absolutely disturbing that I mean, to me, it's idiocy. I really couldn't put it any stronger. It is idiocy to consider the possibility of selling off the ABC. It is the most respected institution in the country. It's more respected than the Parliament. I mean, maybe the High Court's up there, but there is no other body as respected as the ABC. And it's been attacked, it's been attacked, and it's been attacked through its history. It's always had its critics, never more than now. That same kind of carping fringe of people on the side who make the same claims about the ABC being biased, and yet the vast bulk of Australians who watch the ABC come back time and again and vote at the most.
Are you still there, Kerry? Looks like we've just dropped out again.
I think Paul Fletcher's got him and listening to this today. Just when Kerry got to say that bit, out he went. That's Paul Fletcher's hand in there, I'll be bound.
What might help Kerry, the bandwidth could be a little bit narrow there. So if he shuts off his video and just talks, that may be successful.
Okay. I don't know where he is. I can't see it, so he may be trying to do that.
I've tried ringing him, but every time I get his voicemail. So that happened before too, because I thought we could have just had the phone going as well, and instantly, seamlessly switched to that.
Okay,
but as I said, it's been on goes to voicemail, so I don't know whether he's got bad reception as well.
Well, we're getting near the completion. I have only one more final question to Kerry, and then we'll be opening it up to questions. So if Ian Dunlop might get ready when the time has come, when we call for that, who's a former international oil, gas and coal industry executive and a Bradfield climate change educator. So we'll start off with Ian asking a question, and then Stuart Fist, who's a former investigative journalist and a Bradfield resident. So Stuart will ask a question second, and then thirdly we'll go to Emeritus Professor Robin Ewing from Teacher Education.
I'm sorry, I'm back.
That's all right, we're back. We're just getting ready.
We've got a huge storm in our area too,
That's
so
right.
things are very unstable.
I have tried ringing you, Kerry, but I go straight to voicemail every time.
Yeah, well, the phone also relies on the internet. We have
righto.
no.
Okay, no worries.
I
Anyway.
live about 12 kilometres from Byron Bay, where visitors come a year, and we have to rely on the internet for our phone service as well, because we've got no.
You should complain to your local member, Kerry.
Anyway,
Right.
Kerry, we're just going to finish with one final question, then we're going to open up to questions from the audience. And, you know, my question is, you know, really this upcoming federal election, what does it really mean for the ABC?
Well, I think it's a crunch point. If the Liberal Party is returned to office and forms a government again, somehow or other, people who care about the ABC have to deliver a very clear message to them that they do not want the same nonsense to continue with about the ABC that we have seen again and again, because the ABC is reaching a point where it will be very hard to restore what is being lost. There has to be a turning point. I think that it's just as plain as the nose on your face that we have a hostile competitor in News Corp, which is boring in the extent to which it attacks the ABC on so many fronts. The ABC is still standing, but they are a very powerful voice to government, News Corp. The Murdoch media is a very powerful voice to government. And there have clearly been times, I think, when the government has, it has emboldened those people inside the government who are hostile to the ABC. Back in the Howard years, one of John Howard's senior advisors early in his tenure described it to one of the senior ABC executives, news executives, described the ABC News and the Conservative constituency as our enemy talking to our friends. They actually described the ABC as their enemy. Now that is just juvenile. It is juvenile, but it is dangerous. The ABC is a precious part of this nation. We lose it, there's no going back to it. The BBC is under threat. CBC in Canada is under threat. We see one of the great mistakes of the American system was not to build a very strong public broadcaster into their system. PBS, very weak service because it gets bugger all funding from government and relies on subscriptions. And when I worked over there as a correspondent, and I would go into the commercial broadcast studios to send satellite reports, and I would go into PBS. I'd go into the commercial networks, and they were clearly well funded. They worked well. I'd go into the poor old PBS, and it was like walking into a third world war zone. So, how much better might American democracy be today if it had always had a strong broadcaster? Big question, and one for us to think about. So, I think that we should be putting pressure as voters. We should be putting the challenge there to the Labor government to show the ways in which it will support and hopefully boost the funding to the ABC. And it won't just be enough for a Conservative government to be returned and maintain the funding that's there. It has cut that funding to a point where it is seriously hurting the output of the ABC. So both sides have to be called to account leading up to this election so that it will not be business as usual, no matter who is returned.
Thank you, Kerry, for those strong words. So we're going to now have questions. Ian Dunlop, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Janine. I think I am unmuted. Wayne's fixed it. Thanks, Kerry. That was really very interesting. One thing you perhaps haven't mentioned, or you did at the beginning, is the strategic importance of the ABC, because it seems to me that we're heading into a world which is going to have a lot of emergencies in the way we've never really seen before. I mean, climate is one of them, but there's a pile of other things flying around which are either going to change the way the world operates from what we've known. And in many ways, the thing that gets glossed over is that the ABC is a bit akin to the ADF. I mean, you could see it in the bushfires. You need an organisation which actually has got the capacity to actually take a national position.
Yes.
I think in the way that commercial radio will never, or commercial media never will. And it really ought to get talked about a hell of a lot more, I think. But that's a passing comment. My particular question is, though, that I mean, I talk periodically with the ABC on climate. And I've done it for quite some time, particularly the perspective, I guess, that the group I work with has, that we badly underestimated the speed of climate change and the need for action, certainly far more than, which is far more urgent than our leaders tell us. Some years ago, there used to be quite an interest amongst ABC journalists in talking about that. But what I've seen in recent time is that that interest has really dropped off to the point that the only thing that really seems to matter these days is the immediate talking point. And I just wondered, I mean, I sort of, there's obviously enormous pressure coming on the ABC from the likes of, Paul Fletcher and what have you as the communications minister, which in my view is continually trying to undermine it and limit its independence. But I'd really like your view on what do you think is really happening internally, because it seems to me that in many ways ABC management may be actually or putting pressure on journalists to the point that they self-censor and don't really want to get into anything other than the immediate talking point.
Ian, look, for a start, I haven't worked inside the ABC for 6 years now. Of course, I still maintain contacts with people in there. The main sense I have from the many conversations that I have had is a sense of despond and creeping depression, if you like, not despair yet. But people do fear for their jobs. They fear that the fundamental conditions that have been a part of the success story of the ABC are breaking down. In terms of the self-censorship, your suspicion of self-censorship, it is exactly why I say that self-censorship is so iniquitous. It is so it's hard to see, and it's hard to prove. And sometimes the person who is self-censoring isn't even aware that they are. I would hate to think that the ABC is pulling its punches in its coverage of climate change. Sometimes not sometimes, but all the time, when you have these key recurring issues that keep challenging us, and none more so than climate change, which has just been coming, as I said, it's been coming at us now for the best part of 40 years, and intensely since the turn of the century. The pressure that goes on all journalists is to continue to find ways of telling the story that are going to continue to interest people and convince them that this is new information and it's not just the same old banging away on the issue. People do have limited attention spans, Ian, even you, on some issues. There may be times when an editor might say to a reporter who comes with an idea for a story on climate change, look, we've done several in the last X weeks, or if it's Four Corners, look, we just had a program on climate change 4 months ago. We can't do another one now. Then we've got these other competing stories. That might be an element of what you're talking about, that syndrome. But equally, the danger is that some people do get the message that they're not going to be popular if they keep banging away on an issue. A wonderful journalist on The Age named Michael Gordon, who died young. He was only in his 60s when he died, but Michael was one of the great journalists that this country has produced in my lifetime. Very celebrated journalist. And there were two issues that he would keep, that stayed front and center with him. And the biggest, it became a kind of it became almost an unpopular story, certainly an unpopular story for editors, because they would say, there's only so many times we can tell this story. And he would say, it is too important to ignore. The challenge to us is we have to keep telling the story. We have to keep finding new angles on the story. The story's there, we've got to report it. But that was the responsibility that he saw, and he was right. And the sun of climate change.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. And now we'll get our next question. We've got a few people lined up. I know I can see people coming in. Stuart Fifth, if you ask your question next, but has Kerry dropped out again?
Yes, I'm afraid. Looks like he has. Yeah.
All right, well, we've got Stuart next, and then if we could have Robin Ewing, and then Jane Salmon, Kate Sinclair, Ross McGowan, and Lynn McIver. So if we could just keep our questions a little bit short and to the point, and let's see, we've still got plenty of time. We've got, when he comes back.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Stuart.
Sorry, it's not showing. Look, it's Kerry.
Hang on, Stuart. He's not back yet. Yeah,
he's not
Kerry
back yet.
dropped off.
Just wait for him to come back in again.
Radio.
Yeah.
The gremlins are playing up.
We had thought we could use the phone, but his phone's not working either. So.
Yeah.
Pigeons. We should have used pigeons.
It's great to see him still active.
It might be an idea to ask him again to turn his video off.
Yeah, I guess so. It's a shame though.
Sometimes text messages get through.
Well, but he could talk to us with, I mean, we all know what he looks like.
No, but just to let him know that.
All right, well, we're just waiting.
He's very passionate, isn't he? He's so wonderfully passionate.
Yeah.
I noticed the name Jonathan Holmes.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that for a while.
Would you like to step in, Jonathan, and answer the question?
Yeah, where's Jonathan?
Well, I'm here, but I haven't put my video up.
Here he comes.
Sorry
back.
about that.
Okay,
Jonathan.
we've got Stuart Fist, who's a former Bradfield journalist.
Sorry, did I just see Jonathan join in? Jonathan Holmes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, tell him to hang on in case this happens again.
Okay, you can take over.
Sorry, a question.
Okay. Stuart Fist here, Kerry. Look, I'm concerned about the growing culture of what I think is victimhood in the ABC. I'm over 80 and I've been a media tart for most of my life. 60 years ago, I worked with Bob Raymond and Mike Carlton, the founders of Four Corners. And in those days, we battled to get investigative and information, programs up.
Yes.
And about 50 years ago, we had a big fight with Doug McClellan, Gough Whitlam's Minister of Communications, because we fought to get triennial funding for the ABC as the only way to free it from political pressure. And at about the same time, my wife left Four Corners and we set up Australia's first computerized online information company.
Yeah.
Look, what has happened in the last 50 odd years, because Four Corners is still the ABC's flagship in current affairs. There's no triennial funding, and the ABC has not ventured into online information services at all. Yeah, and yet this is the predominant culture of the whole society. Now,
hang on. Sorry. There is still triennial funding, and the pressure is now on for it to be 5-year funding. And I think the opposition has committed to that in that it will come up with a 5-year funding plan. Now, whether they are locking that in, whether their promise locks that in as a permanent feature, that the permanency of triennial funding becomes 5-year funding, I'm not sure. But in terms of an online presence, the ABC has got quite a strong one. I mean, in news at least, it is the leading online news service in Australia.
Yeah, but it doesn't have a service like Wikipedia, which could be done on a shoestring, you know. I mean, what the ABC has is a trust to the whole community trusts it to be the honest arbiter of all of these things.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of areas there that the ABC could be dominant in.
Well,
and they've never done anything. Right?
So,
Sorry, Jonathan, do you want to come in?
no, not really, but honestly.
That's all right.
I was just going to say that, Stuart, that I mean, the poor old ABC is bloody struggling to maintain the things that it has traditionally done. They have built an online service. They led the field with iView, which I personally think is now fallen behind somewhat, and I think a big effort's being putting into boosting that. They led the way with podcasts in Australia. They as commercial news media has declined terribly in rural and regional Australia, the ABC has actually stepped up and increased its service.
I'll give you that with Radio National. I think Radio National is brilliant and shows what television should have been doing a long while ago.
Okay, well, thank you, Stuart, for that input. I think that's really interesting. And now we're going to go to Robin Ewing. Robin, do you want to put ask your question?
Thanks, Janine. Kerry, I'm changing tack a little bit. My question is about the arts. I think we all know how important the arts are to who we are as human beings and how important they are to our ongoing learning, etc. In the light of the Liberal government's significant cuts to arts funding, and which has been exacerbated by COVID and lockdowns, etc., what role can the ABC play in continuing to support the arts? I mean, the ABC has always championed the arts and the importance of creative and performing arts. But this conversation has been about cuts and what the ABC is able to do. My sense is that that's going to be a threat as well.
Oh, look, I've always felt that, I mean, the culture of a nation is just, I won't say it's everything, but it is, but it goes so much to who and what we are as individuals and as a nation. People talk about the soul of a nation, being able to see the soul of a nation through its arts, through the kind of, hopefully the soaring imaginations and creativity of our artists across a huge field. So the ABC, it has always been a really rich and fundamental part of the ABC's charter to cover the arts. And I know that there have been many times when one branch of the arts or other has been critical that they felt the ABC hasn't done enough. And again, when the ABC has to, when the heads of the various departments within the ABC have to sit down and cut their cloth in line with the funding and the resources that they have to work with, all parts of the ABC suffer. All parts of the ABC suffer. And sometimes that sets up internal frictions. You know, a united ABC is a wonder to behold. A divided ABC is something none of us want to see. But those pressures go on internally, inevitably, as people who would die in a ditch to protect those things that that keep them switched on as professionals. You know, I mean, that's the precious thing about one of the really kind of crucial things about the ABC, because people who work for the ABC, to my mind, and I've seen this on and off over 50 years, have always been prepared to go the extra yard as individuals and collectively. Wonderfully collegiate atmosphere. People work brilliantly together, far more often than not. And times when there are bans on overtime, they'll keep working. They'll keep working. They will make their own personal sacrifices to continue to try and meet the standards that are important to them and important to you all. And that all of that goes for the arts in spades. People who work in the arts are just as passionate about what they do as journalists are within the news department, people in documentaries, and all the other parts of the ABC. I mean, there is a real passion in that place. It's palpable.
Yes.
But what is also palpable now is this fear that the strength of the place is starting to drain away.
Yes.
Thank you, Robin, for that question. That's really important. We've got now Jane Salmon and then Kate Sinclair.
Hi. It's pretty intimidating seeing who's here. It's very nice to see you back, Kerry and Quentin. We've missed you just so much.
And Jonathan.
Yes, yes. And
I might say, sorry, I don't want to interrupt your question, but just very quickly, Jonathan is chairing a group of people, the ABC alumni, which is a quite recent body, just in the last 2 or 3 years, which is formed partly for this very purpose, to make sure that the ABC is well represented in the public eye, to try to be heard when the tough times like this are on. And that's the basis on which we're speaking. Yes. Now, sorry, your question.
I was going to mention Michael Gordon in the context of refugee stories, because Michael's a hero of mine.
Absolutely.
And he and Paul Farrell, sorry, I'm just going to mute something. He and Paul Farrell were really, really good with refugee work. We know that in the run-up to elections, issues get muted. The offshore detention story that Michael was so passionate about, along with climate, was only on Four Corners twice in 9 years. Paul Farrell has become a lot less vocal since joining 730. He was, in fact, a great reporter on The Guardian for that issue. Now, we all know that there are a limited number of people, and you can go on and on about the pros and cons of that story. What we have now is an election period where no one wants to talk about, say, refugees.
Well, look, I'll interrupt you just briefly, and I would think that Janine is probably a little bit concerned that we haven't got much time left. But just quickly, I turned on news radio. I turned on News 24. I turned on the ABC's breakfast news program this morning, and I saw Michael interviewing one of the refugees in the same hotel that Novak Djokovic had to
Hotel.
stay in.
Yes.
And so we know that suddenly the light was on those people.
Sure do.
A very compelling interview this morning with the refugee who's been there for nearly 9 years.
Was that Michael Brissenden?
No. It was Michael Boland.
Oh, look, I'll go have a look.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
So to get to the nub of this, we know that during elections, it becomes a binary contest. The news execs flex. We know that certain types of reporting are shut down and that vested interests has its say across the MSN. I'm just wondering what we can do to cut through.
Well, I mean, news is a very competitive beast, particularly these days. And I think that, I mean, it's not, what you're describing is not the way I ever saw it inside the ABC.
Okay.
Executive producers and heads of news bulletins, of course, they're having story conferences each day about what's around and what are the key stories of the day, but they're relying very heavily on their reporters in the field to be telling them, and particularly when you're talking politics and political issues, the ABC still has a formidable team of political correspondents, and they would be describing the news day each day as they see it, and they would have a very strong say in what's going to air. And I think the ABC is the kind of place where if a senior news executive or any senior management figure inside the ABC was to try to suppress a particular story or stories because we were in a political campaign period, I think you'd hear about it very quickly.
Thank you. And now we've got 3 quick questions. Kate Sinclair.
Yeah. Hi, thanks very much. Kerry, I recently participated in a Zoom with the New York Times journalist David Bornstein. He's the co-founder of an organization called Solutions Journalism. Are you familiar with it at all?
This is, go on. Yep, I think so, but go on.
So Solutions Journalism, and it is what it says it is. So he was talking about the fact that there is an escalating level of news avoidance. And I'm speaking for myself, I used to rigidly follow the news, and I'm experiencing uncharacteristic behavior to just thinking, I don't want any more.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that must be happening with the numbers, not just with the ABC, but with a lot of across the whole.
Oh, and the pandemic would have exacerbated that. Yes, I think I think it's a real issue. I mean, I must say, I sometimes look at my screen and I see the mouth moving, and my ears are refusing to take it in. I mean, that's a very human response. There is a bombardment. The other part of the problem is in this kind of 24-hour churn.
Yeah.
I do think that is it goes back to what Ian was saying earlier. There is this obsession with constantly freshening the news, freshening. And I think there is a syndrome within journalism today that if you followed a story for 2 or 3 days, it has to be a hell of a story for you to keep following it. And so I think at times important stories literally fall out. They fall out of the basket because of this obsession to be constantly updating and finding new things to report. And that's partly because of the online service. It's partly because of the 24-hour, essentially 24-hour news operation on radio and television, and online with newspapers. So it is a challenge for journalists, and again, sometimes it comes down to the individual journalist to be prepared to continually fight strongly, to be continually looking for fresh ways, as I said earlier, to tell the story and to make the story relevant to people, whether it's climate change, refugees, or whatever it is. Sorry.
Well, one of the things that seems to be happening is that it's making a lot of us feel powerless.
But that's a part of it, yeah.
If you take the solutions journalism approach, they've actually found, and if they flag that these stories are coming, then there's a lot more. It's been shown that the viewers stay, the viewers are in. And I'm just wondering if the ABC is trying things like solutions journalism and flagging that they've got solutions journalism stories coming in, because it will keep people in.
To be honest, I can't answer you because, as I said, I've been out of the loop for 6 years now.
But does it make sense to you that we do something that, especially for young people as well?
Well, I certainly think that it's not enough to just look for the easy headline on important issues and to not ignore necessarily, but to go light on your reporting of policy and focus more on the politics. That's been an age-old problem, really, but there have been times in this country where journalists have very strongly, where the culture has been very strongly around reporting important policies, as well as the drama of the politics and the personalities and the colour. I think that such is the increasingly shallow nature of news coverage, certainly in the commercial media, and you know, at times you see hints of it in the ABC. That skimming the surface and rolling on to the next story is way too prevalent. So anything that challenges that, and I mean, if you discussing policy is looking for solutions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Discussing policy is looking for solutions, and that should be a really fundamental role of the ABC. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Kay. And I have to be someone like on the ABC and say it's about to happen, the news is about to happen at 7 o'clock and we have to stop. So I'm going to shut down everything. Thank everyone. Sorry that we haven't got your questions if you wanted one.
19 hours.
And I just want to
I
say,
go overtime. I want more. I want more. I want to listen to more.
I just want to say thank you for coming, and thank you, Kerry. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your intelligence. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you
And
for
sorry
your
for my internet.
commitment to journalism. And thank you for giving us the message that we have to fight for our ABC, because that's why we're here, and that's why we believe it, and we're going to do it. And thank you. I know this election's important, but I think the ABC is going to be the really important issue, and that's why tonight's been terrific. So we're going to finish now. Thank you for coming, everyone. Look, we nearly had 200 people. That is just outstanding. Thank you to my team. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kerry. Good night. Janine Kitson, independent for Bradfield.
Thanks, Janine.
Thanks, Janine.
Cheers.
Well done, Janine. Well done, everyone. My favourite is the situation is hopeless. We must take the next step. That's my best quote.
Janine's part of the solution.
Yeah, she sure is.
Hello,
We all
Gina.
are. We all are.
Hello, Gina.
Authorised by Janine Kitson, Suite 1A, Level 2, 802 Pacific Highway, New South Wales, Gordon 2072.